Nana bojo nishnabe dok, nijibe madzit, nin sao jik, bene indodem, mampimichiging donjaba. My name is Alan Corbier, but in my language, Ojibwe or Anishinaabe, I am called the Fisher, Ojik. My clan is the Bine, which is a ruffed grouse. And I'm from the reserve here, First Nation, called Michiging on Manitoulin Island. And we are Anishinaabe people. Historically, Odawa, Bode Adimi or Potawatomi, and Odawa, the three, what are commonly called the three fires. We all moved back here 1830s, but we had always been here, particularly the Odawa and Ojibwe people.
So, Bojo, Nadishnakas Wase Ankurok, Chimsing Dunjaba, Adik Nadodum, Anishinaabe Minwa, Scottish Nadao. My name is Jennifer Bolton. I am currently living in Barrie on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Pre-Confederation Treaty Number 18.
Canada is home to more than 70 Indigenous languages, yet only French and English are considered official languages. According to Statistics Canada, in 1996, 29% of Indigenous people were able to speak an Aboriginal language well enough to conduct a conversation, whereas by 2016, only 16% were able to do so. Although these numbers are low, there is a rise in those who are learning an Indigenous language as a second language. This means that they are learning it outside the home and choosing to learn it for themselves.
The best way for Indigenous children to become fluent in their language is actually through their home. We have to look at history and we have to just look at our modern times, even in cities now, with people that moved to Canada from their home country, and they live with their grandparents. And then they come to, by the time they get to high school or to university, they are speaking they continue to speak their mother tongue, what's called their mother tongue. So for us, what happened with the Indigenous people is that link was broken. So I can only speak for myself here, but I know my experience is very common, especially my generation and younger. My parents spoke Ojibwe to each other every day when I was a child. And I heard my language every day because my parents spoke to themselves, but they turned to speak to my siblings and I, and they spoke in English. And then my grandparents spoke Ojibwe and they spoke English. But all my aunts, uncles, and my grandparents spoke Ojibwe. That generation is the last generation to actually speak it fluently from birth to their old age. And but what had happened, of course, is colonization, mandatory education, whether that mandatory education was residential schools or whether it was day schools. So where the breakage had happened was in what they call intergenerational transmission. And intergenerational transmission is when your language is spoken from grandparent to parent to child. And that usually occurs in the home or in the community. From it, and I just feel like I'm personally invested in that. This is who we are as Anishinaabe people. Our language is integrally tied to and intrinsically tied to our identity and to our history and to who we are and to our ancestors, and we're hoping to our future generations. My wife and I conceived our first child, and I thought, you know what, this language stops with me. My parents spoke Ojibwe, my grandparents all spoke Ojibwe, and all the way back to time immemorial, right back to creation, my ancestors spoke Ojibwe or Anishinaabe. We say Anishinaabe, and it stops with me. So I said, I'm going to try my best to learn it and then to pass it on to my children. But I should have spoke more to my children as they were young. But I didn't stick with that part. I thought I didn't speak enough, and I had this notion that I had to speak perfect Ojibwe in order to pass it on to my children. And that was my mistake there, that I thought that I shouldn't just pass on a broken Ojibwe. But The same thing, I've often thought that our strengths should be where we start off first, and that would be in what would be history, social studies, biology, and geography, and of course, gym class and Ojibwe, and literature, I guess we would call it, instead of English. I just think that we really should just get back down to our basics and bolster our language through our history and through our stories, meaning the Ansokan and the Debajumoan, and then start to look at place names because those are intrinsically tied to those our history and to our identity as well. Those are the challenges: is finding the time, making the time, and then also practicing with somebody who's knowledgeable. You can only get so far with books. You have to have a language mentor as well, and a language community. That was.
I've taken part in 2 different language courses. The first, I guess, more formal language courses. So the first course that I took was through an institution. It was through a university. And the instructor had made the course open to community. So I actually wasn't a student of the institution, but the idea was that Indigenous people don't get access to their languages and language learning. So I attended as a community member, and I was one of many community members who were going as well. My mother came with me as well as one of my cousins. So it was very open format, and it was really community engaged and very well done. The second language course I took a lot more time doing and went to for over, I guess, 2 different offerings was Anishinaabe Akin, and it was a language nest and language course that was run by a member of my home community. So it was done through Beausoleil First Nation, and it was on the land learning. So the intent is to have language learners go and learn language from where it derives, from nature, from elders as well, to have elder story and ceremony involved in the language process. So it was really a life-changing experience for me as well. But both instructors were very knowledgeable and I would say it was a mix. I would definitely say that there were more students there that were enrolled. And it was interesting because I'd say the majority of the students that were enrolled were not Indigenous. And I actually found that very hopeful because if we're all working to retain and reclaim our knowledge, we need lots of people to speak to. So it was very wonderful to see the enthusiasm of all the non-Indigenous language learners be there. And I really liked the fact that the instructor's from a different dialect than I am from, and the instructor made different learning materials so we would all have access to our dialect. So it was very engaging and very inspirational. So I applied to York University, and one of the reasons I chose that over U of T was because they had a Cree language course. And the year I accepted, and then the year that I attended, it was no longer offered. So the biggest challenge I've had is getting access to language learning. If you're not in a university or enrolled somewhere, it's really hard to get access to language learning if you're not living close to your home community, or even for where I live right now, I live in Barrie. My child's school, they do a land acknowledgement. They acknowledge Beausoleil First Nation. They have on their report cards a section for Native language learning. That's what they're still calling it, Native language learning. And yet there's no programs or courses offered. So I think in all my language journey, the biggest challenge I've had is finding it and finding it being consistently offered. So
Alana Johns is a linguist who has worked on an app to promote Inuktitut education. It allows people to select vocabulary based on their interests and listen to the way words are pronounced. She talks about why she worked on the app, who it is targeted towards, and why it is important to her to keep Indigenous languages alive.
Well, we created it was myself and Rita Anderson, and we created it so as to have some material, at least, that people in the community who don't speak the language, which is definitely endangered in Nunatsiavut, but that they, if they wanted to on their own, they could learn a few words or phrases and listen to them so that they could actually go out and use them. So it's targeted towards members of the community, but also outsiders who might wish to learn some words and then come into the community and use them. So it's designed so they could take the app out on the land. These different apps have different properties with respect to that. And this one, all the words are actually the audio files are downloaded onto the device, so you don't have to be connected to the internet. So up north is very spotty, and they don't have the same reliability and resources, and not everybody can afford it as we do here. So it's a really big issue. Of course, it's the communities that have to want to continue. And what you'd see is that in many cases, there were many people in the communities who did want to strengthen the language, but the resources and the money wasn't there. Well, I think it would be great if there were more institutions. Like I think many people have talked for a long time about having a university in Canada's north. That would be really great.
The Native Canadian Centre of Toronto is another great resource for anyone looking to learn an Indigenous language. It has programs for all ages and activities for all interests. Their mission is to empower the Indigenous community in Toronto by providing programs that support their spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental well-being. For those looking for a less academic approach to language learning, Professor Maya Shikabi of York University has developed a video game. As said on the website, the Remembering provides inclusive, sustainable, high-quality intercultural education materials produced by and in support of Indigenous peoples.
Listen. You are ready. There will be trials along the way, but do not fear the past. If we walk this path together, we'll ensure a better future for everyone. This is the path to Histoire vivante.